My CEO husband suddenly showed me an unexpected amount of care by bringing me a thoughtfully prepared breakfast. However, because I was suffering from severe morning sickness, I gave it to his private secretary to eat. An hour later, the secretary suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream in the office. I ran in to check and was left absolutely stunned. That morning, I arrived at the office early, as usual. The morning sun pierced through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the thick stacks of files on my desk. I had just sat down, intending to glance over a few reports, when my office door suddenly swung open. David walked in, carrying a premium, light blue Yeti insulated food container, a high-end brand I had never seen in our kitchen at home. What was even more surprising was the radiant smile on his lips, an unusually warm smile that I hadn't seen in a very long time. He placed the container on my desk, his voice gentle. "Good morning, honey. It's our 3rd wedding anniversary. I wanted to do something special for you." I looked at him in astonishment, then down at the container. David, a man always consumed by endless meetings and business trips, had actually prepared breakfast for his wife with his own hands today. He unscrewed the lid while attentively explaining, "You've been looking so pale lately, and work has been so stressful. I woke up early this morning to personally make your favorite Maryland rich crab bisque to nourish you. Eat it while it's hot." Steam billowed out, carrying the distinct, heavy aroma of seafood, butter, and Old Bay seasoning. If this were me 6 months ago, I might have been moved to tears by this rare gesture of affection. But ironically, at this very moment, that smell was a horrifying nightmare to me. I was secretly 3 months pregnant, and my morning sickness was agonizing. Whenever I smelled seafood, my stomach would churn, and nausea would rise straight to my throat. I tried to suppress it, swallowing hard, and forced a smile. "Thank you, that's so thoughtful of you. But I already grabbed a bagel at home, so I'm still really full." David looked momentarily stunned. The smile on his lips stiffened for a second, before quickly returning to a calm facade. He pushed the container toward me, patiently persuading, "A bagel doesn't give you any nutrients. Just have a little bisque to build up your strength. I spent all morning cooking it. Don't let my effort go to waste." His words sounded gentle, but they carried an invisible pressure. I looked into his eyes, trying to find a hint of sincerity, but all I saw was a calculating anticipation. Just as I was at a loss for how to decline without offending him, a knock on the door came to my rescue. Chloe, the secretary he had hired 3 months ago, walked in holding a stack of documents. She wore a tight pencil skirt that accentuated every curve of her body, her face heavily made up, exuding a flirtatious and highly ambitious aura. Chloe set the documents down, her eyes playfully darting toward David, before glancing at the container of bisque on the desk. Her sickly sweet voice chimed in, "Oh, Mr. Harper, you're so thoughtful. Bringing nutritious food for Natalie first thing in the morning. You're so lucky, Natalie, having a perfect 10 out of 10 husband like him. No one can compare." David ignored her, giving me a final instruction before stepping out of the office. At that moment, an idea popped into my head. I smiled, gently pushing the container toward her. My voice was soft but held an underlying irony that no one could have noticed at the time. "I'm just too full, but it would be a shame to waste David's hard work. Chloe, have you had breakfast yet? If not, please eat this for me. David's crab bisque is delicious, and it's still piping hot." Chloe's eyes widened in surprise, which quickly morphed into glee. As if she had just struck gold, she looked at David scrutinizingly. Seeing that he didn't object, but merely stood in silence with a slightly annoyed expression, she eagerly took the container. Chloe spoke in a coy, whining tone, "Well, if you insist, thank you, Natalie. I'll eat every last drop, I promise. Anything the boss cooks must be an absolute delicacy." I watched Chloe walk out of the room, hugging the container like a treasure, a wave of relief washing over me for escaping the nausea. I tried to focus on work, flipping through financial reports, but the numbers kept dancing before my eyes, making my head spin. The unease in my heart grew by the minute, like the sky before a thunderstorm dark and heavy. I poured myself a glass of warm water, taking small sips to calm the baby shifting in my womb. After 3 years of desperate waiting, God had finally shown mercy and blessed me with this little life. I told myself I had to take good care of my health and not let negative thoughts affect my baby. About an hour later, while I was engrossed in typing, a loud crash echoed from the bullpen outside, sounding like a heavy object hitting the floor. Immediately following it was a blood-curdling scream that ripped through the quiet atmosphere of the entire floor. That scream wasn't an ordinary cry of fear. It carried the tone of absolute, excruciating agony. It was piercing and chilling. My heart skipped a beat, a terrible premonition washing over me. I sprang up and bolted out of my office. The scene before me left me paralyzed. Chloe was writhing on the floor. Right next to her desk, the Yeti container was knocked over. The bisque spilled everywhere. The smell of seafood mixed with the overwhelming stench of vomit created a horrific odor. Chloe was clutching her lower abdomen tightly, her beautiful face now distorted, deathly pale, drained of all blood. Her eyes rolled back in agony. White foam frothed at her mouth, and her body convulsed violently like someone having an epileptic seizure. But the most horrifying thing was that the lower half of her beige skirt was rapidly spreading with a dark crimson stain. Blood. Fresh blood was pouring out, soaking into the carpet. The employees were in a panic, gathering around. Screams and shouts to call 911 echoed chaotically. I stood there, my hands and feet trembling, my throat bitter and choked. What on earth was happening? Why was Chloe in such a state? Asterisk. The bisque. Asterisk. It was the crab bisque I had just given her to eat. That thought flashed through my mind, sending a freezing chill down my spine. Right at that moment, the door to the CEO's office burst open. David rushed out with a look of panic I had never seen before. But he didn't run to help his employee, nor did he ask about her condition. He stopped dead a few steps away, his eyes wide, staring unblinkingly at the pool of blood on the floor. I clearly saw the transformation on my husband's face from shock to fear, and finally to a manic, blinding rage. He snapped his head up, his eyes sharp as daggers, shooting straight at me. That was not the look of a husband worried for his wife upon seeing a gruesome scene, nor the look of a boss feeling pity for his employee. It was the look of a demon, of a murderer watching his prey narrowly escape death. He marched toward me, gripping my upper arm so tightly it sent a jolt of pain through me. He hissed through his teeth, his voice trembling as he suppressed his fury. What did you do? Why? Why is it her? That absurd, accusing question felt like a bucket of ice water slapped across my face, snapping me completely awake. Why was he asking me what I did? Why was he disappointed that the person lying there was Chloe and not me? I looked deep into David's bloodshot eyes, sensing a terrifying truth slowly unraveling. I swatted his hand away, trying to stay calm, my voice cold as I fired back. What did I do? I just gave her the bisque you made. What are you thinking, David? Were you hoping the person lying there was me? David froze, seemingly realizing he had misspoken. He let go of my arm, took a step back, and rubbed his face to hide his confusion and panic. The blaring sirens of an ambulance echoed from the street below, shattering the suffocatingly tense atmosphere between us. The paramedics rushed up, placed Chloe on a stretcher, and wheeled her away. David hurriedly followed, but before stepping into the elevator, he looked back at me, his eyes still harboring malice and threat. He barked an order, "You have to come to Northwestern Memorial Hospital right now. This happened because of the bisque you handed her. Don't even think about running away from your responsibility." I stood watching the elevator doors close, swallowing my tears. The husband I had once loved and trusted implicitly had now revealed his true form as a calculating, terrifying stranger. That crab bisque. If my morning sickness hadn't made me push it away to Chloe this morning, the person lying in that pool of blood right now would be me and the tiny baby in my womb. I would have shared that tragic fate. A cruel reality began to emerge clearly. David never wanted to nourish me. He wanted to murder our child, or perhaps even me. I clenched my fists, my nails digging painfully into my flesh. I would go to the hospital not out of fear of his threats, but to witness firsthand the true face of this monster. Sitting on the cold plastic chairs lining the hospital corridor, I clasped my hands tightly together to stop the trembling spreading through my body. the harsh white fluorescent lights reflected off the polished tiles, creating a chilling sense of isolation. David, the husband I had shared a bed with for 3 years, was pacing back and forth in front of the ER doors like a wounded animal. He pulled at his hair, occasionally glaring at me with a mix of scrutiny and malice, but he absolutely did not dare approach. Looking at his bespoke suit, now a wrinkled mess, I suddenly felt a bitter pity for myself. What was this man so worried about? Was he worried about his little mistress's life? Or was he terrified that some dark secret was about to be dragged into the light? The ER doors finally swung open, breaking the suffocating silence. A middle-aged doctor walked out, pulling down his surgical mask to reveal a stern, exhausted face. David lunged forward like an arrow, his voice cracking with tension. "Doctor, how is she? Is it serious?" I also stood up slowly and walked closer, trying to keep my breathing steady. The doctor looked between the two of us, his gaze lingering on David for a long moment before slowly announcing, "The patient suffered acute toxicity. Fortunately, she was brought in just in time, so she has passed the critical stage. However, the cause of the severe hemorrhaging was due to the patient ingesting a massive dose of misoprostol." The unfamiliar drug name made me frown, but for David, it seemed to deliver a crushing blow to his psyche. The blood drained from his face entirely. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The doctor continued, his tone turning sharp. "This is a medication typically used to induce uterine contractions, assist in labor, or induce an abortion. Finding such a massive dose in her stomach contents indicates this was clearly a targeted poisoning, not common food poisoning. Our hospital has followed standard protocol and reported this to the Chicago Police Department." As soon as he finished, 2 CPD detectives in uniform approached from the end of the hallway. They greeted us sternly and asked for our cooperation in the investigation. David seemed to finally snap out of his trance. He hastily wiped the beads of sweat forming on his forehead, trying to regain his usual authoritative CEO persona. He turned and pointed his finger at me, his voice shaking but full of accusation. "Officers, you must investigate this thoroughly. This morning, I cooked bisque and brought it to my wife. She kept that container in her office for a long time before giving it to Chloe. I suspect my wife, out of baseless jealousy, spiked the food with drugs." I looked at David, feeling as if someone was crushing my heart. So, the script had already been written by him. If I ate that bisque, I would lose my baby. If someone else ate it, he would frame me as the poisoner. I took a deep breath, looked straight into the eyes of the older detective, and calmly said, "I have no motive to do such a thing. You can check the hallway cameras, check the fingerprints on the drug bottle if you find it. And more importantly, I want to know why a bowl of bisque my husband claimed was meant to nourish his wife contained abortion pills, and why the secretary was so severely affected by it." The detective nodded, taking notes, then turned to the doctor and asked a question that made both David and me hold our breath. "Doctor, what is the specific condition of the victim? What were the consequences of this drug?" The doctor sighed, his voice dropping with deep regret. "The patient, Chloe, was 6 weeks pregnant. Because the massive dose of the drug caused violent uterine contractions, we regret to inform you that the fetus could not be saved." The air around us seemed to freeze. I heard David let out a ragged gasp. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the waiting room chairs. His face was utterly blank, his wide, soulless eyes staring into the void. So that was it. That beautiful young secretary was carrying his flesh and blood, and with his own hands, through the malicious calculation intended for his wife, he had accidentally murdered his illegitimate child, one he probably didn't even know existed yet. Looking at my husband's pathetic state, I didn't feel vindicated. I only felt a wave of absolute disgust rising in my throat. The love he had for me, or the passion he had for his mistress, all of it was cheap trash compared to his own selfishness and cruelty. After receiving the shocking information from the doctor, the detectives decided to separate David and me to take our statements right there at the hospital. I was escorted to a quieter corner of the hallway, sitting across from the older detective with sharp, calm eyes. He looked at me, his gaze not judgmental but rather sympathetic, and gently asked, Please recount in detail the process from when you received the food container until the incident occurred. Remember, be as detailed as possible. Do not leave anything out, no matter how small. I closed my eyes, rewinding the memory reel of that fateful morning. I recounted how David unexpectedly appeared with excessive care, something that had completely vanished from our marriage for the past 6 months. I talked about the smell of the seafood making me nauseous, and how I only opened the lid to look before closing it immediately. I emphasized every word. From the moment he placed the container on my desk until Chloe walked in, I never left my chair, nor did I open the container again. That container was in my line of sight and remained completely untouched. I gave it to Chloe solely because I couldn't eat it, and she seemed very excited to have it. On the other side of the hallway, David was also being questioned by a younger detective. He deliberately emphasized the purity of his cooking process. He firmly stated, "I personally went to the market. I personally cooked the bisque in the kitchen early this morning. I am a meticulous man, so I never let the maid touch my wife's food. Once it was done, I put it in the Yeti container immediately and brought it straight to the office. It never passed through anyone else's hands." David firmly believed that this testimony would prove him to be a model husband, while simultaneously narrowing down the suspect list to only me, the only person who interacted with the container in a closed room. But in his panic, he forgot one fundamental thing. The more he insisted he was the sole preparer, the tighter he tied the noose around his own neck, asterisk if times the poison was proven to have been in the bisque from the very beginning. When the questioning paused, the older detective walked over to his colleague, taking David's statement. He whispered something, occasionally casting loaded glances toward David. Seeing this, David grew even more guilty. He abruptly stood up, his voice louder than usual, to cover up his fear. "You officers need to investigate thoroughly. My wife has been insanely jealous lately. Her mind isn't right. Who knows, maybe she secretly slipped the drug in when I stepped out of the room." I heard every single one of those heartless words. How agonizing. The man I once loved more than myself was now trying every possible way to throw me into prison to escape his own crimes. I stood up, walked over to them, looked David straight in the face, and asked a single question, my voice eerily calm. "David, if you think I did it, what is my motive? To kill the secretary? Or are you afraid people will find out that the bisque was never meant for Chloe? It was meant for me?" David jolted, his eyes darting wildly to avoid my direct gaze. He stammered, "What? What nonsense are you talking about?" Time dragged on like lead. Every minute waiting for the lab results was mental torture. I sat quietly, resting my hand lightly on my lower abdomen, an instinctual move to protect the tiny baby caught in the eye of the storm. Finally, a forensic technician walked out with a report in hand. He announced sternly, "On the rim of the container and the spoon, we found the fingerprints of Mrs. Natalie Harper and the victim, Chloe. This matches the statements. However, crucially, the toxin was heavily dissolved into the bisque, absorbed deeply into the crab meat. This proves the drug was introduced during the cooking process, or while the bisque was still boiling hot and stirred thoroughly, not merely sprinkled on top after it was boxed." This conclusion was a bucket of ice water thrown directly in David's face, completely demolishing the theory he tried to construct to frame me. If I had slipped the drug in upon receiving the container at the office, it could not have dissolved so evenly. David's face changed colors, going from pale white to a sickly gray. He started rambling uncontrollably. "No, impossible. She must have. Chloe must have taken the pills herself. Yes, she was pregnant. She wanted to abort it, so she took the pills before eating the bisque. You have to investigate her. Don't falsely accuse an innocent man." I looked at my husband's pathetic state, feeling both ridiculous and tragic. A man who was once my pride was now revealing his true form as a coward who dared to commit a crime, but didn't dare face the consequences. I spoke up, my steely voice cutting through his rambling. "David, stop struggling. If Chloe took the pills herself, why was the drug times the bisque? Are you going to say she took the pills and then threw up backward into the container? Do your excuses even sound logical to you?" David spun around, his eyes shot with red veins. "Shut up, what do you know? You hate me, you want to destroy me, that's why you set this up. You. You secretly put it in when I wasn't looking. His stubbornness made even the police officers shake their heads in disbelief. The lead detective closed his file and looked at David with sharp, cold eyes. Mr. Harper, your statement and the forensic results have massive contradictions. We need you to come back to the precinct to clarify a few issues. Furthermore, we will be extracting the dashcam footage from your car and the security camera footage from your kitchen to verify the cooking process you described. Hearing the word camera, David flinched as if struck by lightning. I knew perfectly well that our mansion in the suburbs had a security camera in the living room pointed straight at the kitchen, and his car had a dashcam recording every movement. Those were evidence that couldn't lie. If he truly put the poison in the food, there would undoubtedly be a flaw. David's eyes wavered violently. His initial confidence was completely gone, replaced by the naked terror of a criminal standing before the gallows. He knew the trap he had set for his wife was now tightening around his own neck. I stood up, adjusted my coat, and looked straight at my despicable husband one last time before he was escorted to the precinct. David, you said this bisque was filled with your love. Now I understand. It turns out your love smells like poison. Thank God in heaven, our child doesn't have to share the tragic fate of that poor baby. I left him standing paralyzed in the cold hospital corridor and walked away without looking back, silently thanking fate for giving me a chance to survive and seek justice for myself and the child in my womb. Leaving the hospital, I didn't go home. I took a cab straight to the office in downtown Chicago. The sky outside was slate gray, dark clouds churning, signaling a massive storm about to hit the city exactly like the turbulent state of my mind. As soon as I stepped into the corporate lobby, I could feel the probing stares and the hushed whispers of the employees. The news of Chloe's poisoning had spread like a virus. People were speculating all sorts of things. The most malicious rumor was that the jealous boss's wife found out the secretary was pregnant with her husband's child and poisoned her as a warning. Hearing those fabricated lies cut me to the core. But I knew I couldn't afford to collapse right now. I had to be strong. I had to stand firm to uncover the truth and clear my name. I walked straight into my office and shut the door tight, barricading myself from the gossip outside. A moment later, there was a soft knock. It was Lauren, my trusted assistant, who had been with me since the early days of building my career. Lauren walked in, her face anxious, but her eyes filled with determination. She placed a silver flash drive on my desk and spoke quietly. Natalie, I did what you asked. I pulled all the security footage from the building and the parking garage from this morning. I found some major anomalies. I plugged the USB into my computer, and black and white images appeared on the screen. Lauren pointed at the timestamps. Look at this. Mr. Harper's car entered the garage at 7:15 a.m., but he didn't step out of the elevator onto our floor until 8:15 a.m. Usually, it takes less than 5 minutes from the garage to here. So, what was he doing for an entire hour? Lauren's question sent a chill down my spine. A mysterious, missing hour. That was more than enough time to do something incredibly shady. I stared intently at the screen, trying to find more clues. Lauren fast-forwarded the video to another angle near the emergency stairwell in the basement. And look at this. Look closely at this guy. On the screen appeared a man in a white dress shirt, wearing a thick face mask, walking hurriedly. He was carrying a fairly large black trash bag, sneaking from the elevator direction toward the waste disposal area behind the building, instead of using the communal trash chutes on the floors. It's Hunter, I gasped, instantly recognizing his slightly hunched posture and signature haircut. Hunter was David's personal assistant and his distant cousin. He was a yes man who followed David's every order like a loyal dog. Why would Hunter need to sneak down the stairs to throw away trash at that hour? And what was in that black bag? Was it the drug packaging? Gloves? The guilty evidence David wanted to dispose of after preparing the bisque of death during that missing hour. Lauren looked at me, her voice resolute. I suspect that trash bag holds crucial evidence. I sent someone to check the dumpsters, but the garbage trucks came by 30 minutes ago. However, I know Hunter is careful, but he's also incredibly cheap. He usually doesn't throw important things into the communal trash right away. He hides them to dispose of later. I'll have someone tail him immediately. I nodded, squeezing Lauren's hand tightly. Thank you, Lauren. Right now, you're the only person I can trust. Be careful. They're backed into a corner, so they'll be desperate. Lauren left, leaving me alone in the expansive office. I looked out the window. The rain started to fall heavily, lashing against the glass, leaving streaked, blurred marks. The web of lies spun by David and his accomplices was beginning to reveal its fatal flaws. The missing hour and Hunter's shady actions were the keys for me to flip the board. The rain outside showed no signs of stopping. Heavy drops whipped against the windowpane, leaving long streaks like unhealed scars. I sat in my office, the glow from the computer screen illuminating my exhausted face, but my eyes burned with fierce determination. Lauren, my brilliant and agile assistant, placed a thin stack of documents in front of me. Its physical weight was light, but its implications weighed a ton. Lauren spoke in a low voice, laced with indignation on my behalf. Natalie, look at this. I had a contact in property management look into it. The luxury apartment Chloe is living in isn't leased under her name. It's leased by a commercial service company. I picked up the paper. The words times Apex Holdings LLC times jumped out at me. The name sounded prestigious, but I knew it was just an empty shell. The legal representative of this company was Hunter, David's assistant and cousin. Lauren continued her analysis, her finger pointing at the printed bank statements. The rent is $5,000 a month, plus exorbitant HOA fees. All of it is wired regularly from Apex Holdings' account, but the funds flowing into this company are routed through a slush fund that Mr. Harper set up under the guise of client entertainment expenses. I smiled bitterly, a smile of ultimate cynicism. $5,000 a month for rent, not even counting shopping and living expenses. Meanwhile, the dress I was wearing was 3 years old and fraying at the edges. The handbag I used was just a standard mid-range brand worth a few $100. David was always complaining about how tough the business was, telling me we had to tighten our belts to save for our future. It turned out the future he was worried about wasn't this family. It was the lavish love nest for his little mistress. I flipped to the next page. Staring back at me was a stealthily taken photo of Chloe walking into an upscale private OB/GYN clinic. This photo was taken 2 weeks ago, Lauren explained. She went in for a prenatal checkup. That meant Chloe knew perfectly well she was carrying David's flesh and blood. She wasn't as innocent as her exterior suggested. She was using that pregnancy as a strategic bargaining chip to force the boss to make a choice. I looked at Chloe's youthful, plump face in the photo, suppressing a shudder. Behind that naive facade was the calculation of a seasoned veteran. She wanted to step up and become the lady of the house, wanting to trample on my happiness to build her own castle. But she never expected that the man she chose to rely on was a cold-blooded monster, ready to ruthlessly murder his own flesh and blood to protect his own interests. The phone on my desk suddenly buzzed, shattering the silence. The screen displayed the name Hubby, a name I hadn't had the time to change. It felt so incredibly ironic and bitter. I took a deep breath, rubbed my chest to calm my racing heart, and pressed answer. David's familiar, deep voice came through the line. But now, all I heard was nauseating hypocrisy. "Wifey, where are you?" I just got back from the CPD precinct. I'm exhausted. They asked me all sorts of ridiculous questions, making my head pound. I forced down my anger, pretending my voice was trembling and anxious. "I'm at the office. I'm so scared, David. Everyone is gossiping. I don't dare go home. Are you? Are you okay? Did the police give you a hard time?" David let out an exaggerated sigh over the phone, seemingly trying to play the part of the wrongfully accused husband. "What can they do to me? A clear conscience fears no accusation. I'm just worried about you. I don't want you overthinking and affecting your health. Just stay put or go to your parents' house to rest. Don't listen to the crazy rumors outside. I'll handle everything and make it go away." Hearing his hollow words of concern, I wanted to scream in his face that I knew everything, but reason held me back. I needed him to be overconfident. I needed him to think I was still the naive little lamb, so he would expose more flaws. I replied softly, "Okay, I trust you. Get some rest. I'll be home a bit late tonight to finish up some backlog." Hanging up, I looked out at the blinding rain outside the window. Asterisk, David. Do you really think you're controlling the game? You are gravely mistaken. Asterisk. Night fell, and the city lit up brilliantly. But the glamour couldn't hide the dark, twisted corners of the human heart. I received a text from the private driver I had secretly dispatched. Mary Chloe's mother had arrived at the Greyhound bus terminal. She had caught the earliest bus from rural Ohio the moment she heard her daughter was in an accident. I instructed the driver to take her to a modest but clean motel near the hospital, with strict orders not to take her to the hospital immediately, as visiting hours were over. She needed to rest and regain her strength after the long journey. I arrived at the motel as the clock struck 9 p.m. The moment I walked into the lobby, I recognized Mary immediately. She was huddled on a sofa, a small, frail woman wearing a faded, worn-out brown jacket and scuffed slip-on shoes. Next to her were two bulging canvas bags. They likely contained rice, fresh vegetables, and country gifts the poor mother had painstakingly brought to the city for her daughter. That sight made my nose sting, bringing a pang of sympathy as I thought of my own mother, who was also hardworking and sacrificed everything for her children. Seeing me approach, Mary clumsily stood up, her calloused, chapped hands wringing together in anxiety. I smiled, taking her hands, my voice warm. "You must be Chloe's mother, Mary, right? I'm Natalie, Chloe's supervisor at the company. I heard you arrived, so I came to see if you needed anything to eat or rest." Tears welled up in Mary's eyes. Her voice trembled with a thick rural accent. You're my Chloe's boss? Bless your heart, you're too kind." My Chloe, she was foolish. She didn't know what she ate to end up like this. Back home, she's such a good, hard-working girl, ma'am. I helped her sit down and poured her a cup of warm water. Seeing the absolute trust and pride in her eyes when she spoke of her daughter, my heart twisted. She had no idea that her good, hard-working daughter was living in a luxury apartment she could never dream of in a lifetime of hard labor, carrying designer bags worth her entire life savings. I gently asked, "Mary, does Chloe still call you often? Does she tell you about her life or her job?" Mary answered honestly, "Oh, yes. She calls all the time. She says the company treats her so well, the pay is high, and she gets to live in a free, beautiful company dorm. Every month, she sends me $300 for my medicine. She tells me, 'Mom, don't worry. I live great up here. I don't lack for anything.'" Hearing this, I couldn't suppress a sigh. $300 sent back to Ohio to be a good daughter, yet she was ready to blow tens of thousands on a luxury item to win over her lover. How fragile and fake that filial piety was. I decided Mary needed to see the truth. Even though I knew it would be cruel to her, I feigned surprise. "Oh? Chloe told you she lives in a company dorm? I thought she rented a high-end condo at the Aqua Tower. That place is incredibly expensive. 1 month's rent is equal to a factory worker's yearly salary, Mary. And I noticed Chloe uses a lot of designer brands. That handbag she brought to work the other day, I heard it costs around $10,000. Mary was stunned. Her cloudy eyes widened in pure bewilderment. What did you say? A $10,000 bag? That's impossible. My daughter is so frugal. She won't even throw away a torn shirt. She told me she lived in the company dorm. I gently patted the back of her hand, my voice lowering with implication. Maybe Chloe was just afraid you'd worry, so she didn't tell you the truth. But please, rest well tonight. Tomorrow, I'll take you to the hospital so you can ask her yourself. I'm just afraid. She's young and beautiful, and the city has so many temptations. If she gets taken advantage of by someone, it will ruin her life." My words planted a seed of doubt in the poor mother's heart. Mary sat dazed, staring into the void, her trembling hands fiddling with the hem of her worn jacket. She began to faintly realize that the little girl from the countryside had become a stranger, hiding earth-shattering secrets from her. I left the motel with a heavy heart. I didn't want to hurt her, but she was the most crucial witness. She was the only person who could awaken whatever conscience Chloe had left, and she was the lever I needed to expose David's true face. In this war, no one escaped unhurt, not even the most innocent. The next morning, as I was driving out of my apartment garage to head to the office, a figure suddenly blocked the exit. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping in panic. Once I focused, I realized it was Hunter. He stood there, looking shifty, his eyes darting around as if terrified of being caught. Hunter tapped lightly on my window, signaling he wanted to talk. I rolled the window down a crack enough to hear him, but keeping a safe distance. "Natalie, please, give me a few minutes. I have something really important. Mr. Harper told me to hand this to you personally." His voice was a trembling whisper. I smirked coldly and unlocked the door, letting him sit in the passenger seat. In the confined space of the car, the sour stench of sweat, mixed with stale cigarette smoke, radiated from him. He was clearly incredibly tense. Hunter shakily pulled a thin manila folder from his jacket pocket. He placed it on my lap, then immediately retracted his hand as if he'd been burned. "What is this?" I asked, my voice icy, not even glancing at him. This is Chloe's old medical file that Mr. Harper just found this morning," Hunter stammered, beads of sweat rolling down his temples. Inside is the receipt, showing Chloe bought the pills herself. The abortion pills at an underground pharmacy yesterday. "Mr. Harper said you should take this and carefully hand it to the police. Tell them you accidentally found it in the drawer of Chloe's desk. That way, Mr. Harper's name will be cleared, and you won't be implicated at all." I picked up the folder and slowly opened it. Inside were 2 sloppy medical exam papers and a crumpled retail receipt. I held the receipt up to the light. The messy handwriting clearly stated the drug name, misoprostol, and the purchase date was yesterday afternoon. But there was one laughable detail. The ink on the receipt was still fresh, the paper pristine white, bearing no creases or signs of age. It was obviously a fake receipt hastily created last night. "Framing someone else," I muttered, then turned to glare at Hunter with a gaze so sharp it made him shrink into his seat. "Do you and David think I'm a 3-year-old? The ink on this receipt isn't even completely dry. You want me to hand this to the cops? That's basically telling me to confess that I forged the evidence. Or do you people want to frame Chloe, claiming she bought the pills herself to commit suicide because of depression, just so David gets off scotangent-free? Meanwhile, I get branded as an accomplice, who knew and didn't stop her?" Hunter turned pale, his lips trembling violently. No, that's not it, Natalie," Mr. Harper said. He said if you just present this, it's all over. You're his wife, you have to help him. If Mr. Harper goes down, the company collapses, and you lose everything too. He was trying to use psychological warfare, preying on the fear of losing my assets and status. But he was dead wrong. These assets were built on the sweat and blood of my parents. I would rather tear it all down and rebuild than let it fall into the hands of a murderer. I threw the folder back at Hunter, my voice like steel. "Take this garbage and get out of my car right now. Go back and tell David. If he wants to put on a play, he needs to hire professional actors. As for you, Hunter, you are acting as an accessory to attempted murder. You better watch your own back, because by the time you're in a prison cell, regretting it will be too late." Hunter frantically grabbed the folder, opened the door, and bolted like a ghost was chasing him. Watching his pathetic silhouette disappear behind a concrete pillar, I knew David was in absolute panic mode. He was thrashing around in the mud pit he had created himself, and the more he thrashed, the tighter the noose got. This clumsy theatrical act wouldn't save him. It would only serve as further evidence of his cruelty and cowardice. Returning to the office, I called Lauren in immediately. The atmosphere in my office became as tense as a military command center. Lauren set her laptop on my desk, her face showing the excitement of someone who just found buried treasure. "Natalie, exactly as you predicted. I reviewed all the call logs for Mr. Harper and Hunter over the past week. There is one unknown number that appears with alarming frequency, especially the night before the incident. I traced the owner of this number. You won't believe it. It's Olivia. Olivia. I dug through my memory for that name." Lauren quickly added, "Olivia was in the same college class as Mr. Harper." She's currently a pharmacist, working as a pharmaceutical rep for a major drug company. I heard from some of the older HR ladies that Olivia used to date Mr. Harper back in the day, but then he married you, so they broke it off. I didn't expect them to be in contact again. A pharmacist, an ex-girlfriend, and secret late-night phone calls. All the disjointed puzzle pieces began snapping together to form a complete picture. David couldn't buy that restricted drug himself because he was afraid of exposing his identity, so he went to Olivia. He probably used sweet talk, promised her money, or reignited old flames to seduce her into helping him. "Do you have proof of them meeting?" I asked, my heart pounding. Lauren nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Right here. I had the P.I. Pull the security footage near Apex Holdings that shell company Hunter runs. Look at the corner of the screen. A grainy, black and white video played on the screen, but the quality was clear enough for identification. A familiar car pulled up to a blind spot. Hunter stepped out, looking around suspiciously. A moment later, a tall woman wearing dark sunglasses approached. It was Olivia. She handed Hunter a small package wrapped in newspaper. Hunter took it, shoved it into his pocket, and they quickly went their separate ways. The timestamp on the camera was the afternoon before the incident. "A small package wrapped in newspaper," I murmured, my eyes glued to the screen. That was the poison. Olivia was the one who supplied the weapon for David. I turned to Lauren, my eyes resolute. "Lauren, this is the weakest link in their chain. Olivia is educated. She has a stable career. She might be doing this for money or for love, but she is definitely not a professional criminal. She will be terrified if she realizes she's facing prison time for accessory to murder." Lauren understood my intention instantly. "You mean we hit Olivia psychologically?" I nodded, a cold smile forming. "Exactly. David is trying to frame Chloe, and it's highly likely he has a script prepared to throw Olivia under the bus too. If this blows up, he'll say Olivia gave him the drugs on her own, or tricked him into thinking they were vitamins. We need to be one step ahead. I'm going to meet Olivia. I'll show her the dark future David is painting for her." Between going to prison for her ex-lover and acting as a witness to get a plea deal, I believed Olivia was smart enough to know which path to choose. The net had been cast, and the most crucial prey had revealed itself. I knew the upcoming meeting with Olivia would be a battle of wits, but I held the trump cards that David could never anticipate. The naked, brutal truth was about to be exposed, and those who sowed the wind would reap the whirlwind. The next morning, the sky was still a gloomy, slate gray, threatening to dump another heavy rainstorm on the city. I picked up Mary from the motel and drove her to Northwestern Memorial to visit her daughter. The hardworking country mother was still stubbornly clutching her old canvas bag. Inside were dozens of farm-fresh eggs and a bundle of organic greens she had hastily picked from her garden. She said, "Chloe loves the eggs from the chickens I raise. She says the eggs in the city smell weird and aren't as fragrant as the ones back home." Hearing her say that made my heart ache. A mix of pity and profound embarrassment rose in my chest. A mother's love is as vast as the ocean, yet the daughter used that heart to trade for the vain, hollow luxuries of the city. Stepping into the hospital room, the overpowering smell of antiseptics hit Mary's nose, making her wince and her steps falter timidly. Chloe had been moved to recovery. She lay weak and frail on the stark white hospital bed, her once beautiful face now pale and sunken, looking like a withered leaf. Seeing her mother walk in, Chloe startled awake. Her dry lips parted, weakly calling out, "Mom." Mary rushed to the bed, dropping her canvas bag on the floor. She grabbed her daughter's freezing hands, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my baby. How did it come to this? You were perfectly fine. How did you get food poisoning so bad you lost the—" Mary choked on her words, not daring to finish the sentence, afraid of touching her daughter's pain. Chloe turned her face away, avoiding her mother's gaze, bitter tears rolling down her cheeks. But Mary, with the instincts of a mother who scrimped and saved every penny, suddenly locked her eyes on the bedside table. Resting right there was Chloe's expensive designer handbag, sitting proudly next to the latest iPhone model. The glaring contrast between those luxury items and the old canvas bag on the floor, along with Mary's frayed clothes, made the room feel suffocatingly tense. Mary pointed a trembling finger at the handbag, her voice breaking. That bag. Miss Natalie said it costs $10,000. Where did you get the money to buy that, Chloe? You make a meager salary, and you have to pinch pennies to send money back to me. How dare you spend so recklessly? Chloe looked at me in panic, then turned to her mother, vehemently denying it. No, Mom, Natalie is mistaken. This bag is a fake. I bought it at a flea market for $50. Don't listen to people's gossip. I stood leaning against the door frame, my arms crossed, quietly observing this clumsy theatrical act. I walked slowly toward the bed, placed my hand lightly on Chloe's shoulder, my voice low, but enough to instill absolute terror in her heart. I leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Do you think David is going to come visit you? He's busy trying to prove to the cops that you bought the pills and took them yourself. Whether this bag is real or fake, you and he know best. Stop lying to your elderly mother." Chloe froze completely. Her eyes widened, staring at me in shock as terror consumed her entire mind. She realized that I knew everything. And more importantly, the man she had trusted with her entire life was now trying to discard her like a used, worthless object. Seeing her daughter tremble, Mary thought she was in pain. She hurriedly rubbed her arms and legs, muttering loving words of comfort. Watching this scene, I felt no vindication. I only felt an overwhelming sadness. This brutal truth would have to come out sooner or later, and the person who would suffer the most wasn't the one who committed the sin, but the innocent, devoted mother standing right there. I pulled up a chair and sat further away, pretending to look at my phone to give the two of them space, but in reality, I was observing every psychological shift in Chloe. Before I sat down, I intentionally forgot the manila folder Hunter had given me right on the table, next to Chloe's handbag. The folder was casually placed, revealing a corner of the forged CVS receipt for the misoprostol. I knew Chloe's curiosity, and more importantly, I knew she was in a state of extreme anxiety. Any clue related to David right now was a life preserver she desperately wanted to grab. Sure enough, when Mary turned away to pour a glass of water, Chloe spotted the folder. She stealthily reached out, grabbed it, and hastily flipped it open. I clearly saw her frail shoulders shake violently when she saw the receipt bearing her name. Chloe's face went from pale to ghost white, drained of all blood. She recognized the handwriting, recognized the name of the drug, and most importantly, she recognized the dark intent behind that thin piece of paper. David, the man who had promised her the world and a legitimate title, was now forging evidence to paint her as the murderer of her own child. Her blind faith collapsed in an instant, leaving a deep abyss of despair. Right at that moment, the hospital door opened. The attending doctor walked in with a nurse. He glanced at the medical chart, then looked at Chloe with eyes full of pity and concern. The air in the room grew heavy, like a stone pressing down on us. The doctor sighed, his voice somber as he announced, "The family needs to be prepared." Because the patient ingested an overdose of the medication, it caused violent uterine contractions and prolonged hemorrhaging. The uterus has suffered severe damage. We tried our best to preserve it, but her chances of becoming a mother in the future are very difficult, almost zero. The devastating news struck like lightning. Hearing this, Mary collapsed onto the hospital floor. A heart-wrenching wail tore through the room. "Oh Lord, my baby is so young. Why is God so cruel to her? My baby. My poor baby." The cries of the elderly mother were like knives slicing through the heart of anyone listening. It was agonizing and helpless. As for Chloe, she lay paralyzed on the bed. Her wide, soulless eyes stared up at the stark white ceiling. Not a single tear fell, because the pain had surpassed the limits of human endurance. Losing her child, losing her ability to become a mother, being betrayed and framed by her lover, it all crashed down at once, burying the young girl's life. I walked over to help Mary up, my heart heavy. I looked at Chloe. In those empty eyes, I saw the shattering of her vain, superficial dreams. I leaned in close to her once more, speaking softly. My voice was cold, but also filled with bitterness. "Do you see now? The price of stealing another woman's husband. The price of those luxury goods. It's steep. He didn't just rob you of your child. He robbed you of your future as a mother. Do you still want to cover for him? Chloe turned her head to look at me, her lips trembling, her eyes flashing with ultimate hatred. Leaving the hospital with a chaotic mind, I drove to the prearranged meeting spot with Olivia. It was a high-end cafe, tucked away on a quiet street in the Gold Coast, exquisitely decorated. And most importantly, this cafe had a high-definition security camera system recording clearly from every angle. I chose a table in a secluded corner, where I could monitor the entrance but still maintain privacy. I sat there, lightly stirring my orange juice, trying to keep my mind perfectly calm before the approaching storm. Right on time, Olivia appeared. She walked into the cafe, exuding the arrogant, sophisticated aura of a successful woman. She wore a burgundy silk wrap dress that complemented her pale skin and alluring figure. She carried an expensive designer bag and wore oversized sunglasses that hid half her face. She scanned the cafe once before locking onto my table. The corner of her mouth curled up into a condescending half-smirk. Olivia walked over, pulling out the chair opposite me in an entitled manner. She took off her sunglasses, revealing sharp, heavily made-up eyes. "Hello, Natalie," Olivia started, her voice sweet but laced with thorns. I didn't expect the model, legitimate wife to schedule a meeting with her husband's ex in a place like this. "What do you need me for? Or do you want me to give you advice on how to keep your husband? Though, it is strange. How do you keep a husband so bored he has to come looking for me to vent?" Olivia's words were entirely provocative. She was intentionally poking at my wounds to see how I would react. If this were the old me, I might have lost my temper or broken down in tears. But the me of today had been through too much pain to be shaken by such cheap jabs. I looked calmly at Olivia, giving a slight smile. "Olivia, I didn't ask you out here to throw a jealous fit or fight over a cheating man. A man like David. I'd give him to you for free. I came here to save you from a spectacular loss, before you turn yourself into a convicted felon." Olivia burst into ringing laughter. It sounded out of place in the quiet cafe. "Save me? Are you joking? Why would I need you to save me? I have money, a career, and freedom. You'd better worry about yourself." I didn't argue. I quietly pulled out my phone, opened the photo the PI had captured from the security camera, and pushed the phone toward Olivia. My voice hardened. "Take a good look. The afternoon before yesterday, in the blind spot near Apex Holdings, you met Hunter, David's assistant. That small package wrapped in newspaper you handed him. What was inside? Was it vitamins? Or was it misoprostol?" The smile on Olivia's face vanished instantly. She picked up the phone, staring at the photo. Her hands started to tremble. The color drained from her face. The thick layer of makeup couldn't hide the panic rising in the depths of her eyes. The cigarette she was about to light dropped onto the table, rolled a few times, and lay still. Olivia looked up at me, her voice cracking, completely losing the confidence from earlier. Where did you get this? This is just me handing documents to Hunter. Don't you dare slander me." I stared straight into her eyes, my gaze as sharp as a knife. "What kind of documents need to be wrapped in newspaper and handed over like a drug deal? Olivia, I know you're a pharmacist. You understand the regulations on restricted drugs better than anyone. Do you think the police are naive? Once they trace the batch number, do you really think you can escape?" Olivia sat there, her shoulders slumping. Her initial arrogance had evaporated completely, leaving only the image of a woman terrified of the abyss of prison. I knew I had her by the throat. Now was the time to deliver the decisive blow. I leaned back in my chair, my voice dropping, equal parts threatening and enticing. "Olivia, do you think David will protect you? This morning, he ordered Hunter to forge fake evidence to frame Chloe for buying the pills herself. So, if the police come knocking, what do you think he'll say? He'll say that times you asterisk, out of jealous, lingering feelings for him, wanted to win him back, so you tricked him into buying poison to kill his wife." Olivia shuddered, her eyes widening in sheer horror. She understood David's true nature too well. A selfish monster, willing to sacrifice anyone to protect his own interests. I continued attacking her psychological defenses. "You have money, beauty, and a bright future ahead of you. Do you want to trade all of that to go to prison as an accessory to murder? How much did David promise you? 50,000? 100,000? Is that amount enough to buy back your freedom and reputation when you get out of prison with a felony on your record? My questions slammed into Olivia's mind like sledgehammers. She buried her face in her hands and broke down sobbing, her shoulders shaking violently. The glamour and snobbery had been stripped away, leaving only weakness and belated regret. I didn't want to go to prison. I thought they were regular abortion pills. David told me his wife, meaning you, was pregnant with another man's child. He said he wanted to induce a natural miscarriage so he could legitimately kick you out without having to split the assets. I just wanted to help him and make some quick cash. Olivia stammered her confession between sobs. I smiled bitterly, despising them both. It turned out that in their eyes, the life of an unborn child was merely a tool to achieve their goals. I leaned forward, looking deep into Olivia's eyes. Now is not the time for crying. You only have one way out. Hand over the evidence of David placing the order, the text messages, the call recordings. I will turn them over to the police and ensure they know you were merely deceived and manipulated. You will become a cooperating witness, receive a plea deal, and get a chance to rebuild your life. Do you choose a life sentence in prison alongside David, or do you choose to save yourself? Olivia looked up at me, her eyes wavering violently between terror and a fragile hope. She bit her lip until it bled, wrestling with her thoughts for a few brief seconds that felt like a century. Ultimately, survival instinct won out. Olivia tremblingly opened her designer bag and pulled out a small silver USB drive. She placed it on the table and pushed it toward me, as if pushing away a burning coal. Everything is in here, she said, her voice hoarse. The recorded phone calls where he asked me to get the pills. The texts showing the deposit transfer. Even the promises he made about leaving you to get back together with me. Take it. Please, just don't let me go to prison. I picked up the USB, clutching it tightly in my palm. It was freezing cold, yet it contained enough heat to incinerate David's entire career and life. I stood up, looking at Olivia one last time with a gaze of both pity and warning. You made the right choice. Keep your mouth shut and wait to hear from me. Do not be foolish enough to warn David, or you will lose this final chance. Holding the tiny USB drive nestled in the palm of my hand, it felt as heavy as a mountain. I knew what it contained wasn't just data. It was the death warrant for my marriage. I didn't dare go home, nor did I dare go back to the office. Instead, I drove to the office of a private investigator I knew, a place with the best soundproofing equipment, to confront the truth. The room was pitch black, illuminated only by the eerie blue glow of the computer screen. The whirring of the cooling fan sounded agonizingly loud. When I plugged the USB into the port, my hand was shaking so badly I missed the slot twice. A folder popped up containing a series of audio files and screenshots of text messages, meticulously sorted by date by Olivia. This proved she had been guarding against David's betrayal from the start. I clicked on the most recent audio file, dated 3 days ago. The computer speakers crackled with static, then the chillingly familiar voice of my husband rang out. His tone in the recording was cold and ruthless, completely different from his usual dignified demeanor. Asterisk, see what you can do. Find me something strong, preferably colorless and odorless so I can mix it into her food. My wife has morning sickness right now. I want her to miscarry naturally and cleanly. That way, I can legitimately kick her to the curb without dealing with messy asset divisions. That fetus is an obstacle, do you understand? Asterisk. Every single word from David acted like poisoned needles, piercing my eardrums, penetrating straight into my heart. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle a choked sob. Hot tears spilled out, rolling down my cheeks and falling onto the cold back of my hand. It turned out the original target of that fateful bisque was me. It was the child forming in my womb. He never wanted to nourish his wife. He wanted to murder his own flesh and blood, just to protect the wealth he greedily wanted to hoard. Chloe eating that bisque was merely an accidental tragedy, an ironic twist of fate that saved my life and my baby's life by a hair's breadth. Next was the recording of the call between David and Olivia after Chloe was admitted to the hospital. David's voice was now full of panic and cruelty. Asterisk, shut your mouth. Don't say a damn word to the cops. Blame it all on Chloe. Say she bought the pills and took them herself. I'll bribe the right people at CPD. If you breathe a word about me, don't blame me for getting vicious. Remember, if I go down, you won't live in peace either. Asterisk. His blatant threats and irresponsible washing of hands made me feel disgusted to my core. The man I had loved, the man I had shared a bed with for 3 years, turned out to be a demon in human skin, ready to sacrifice his mistress and his old friend just to keep his CEO chair and his hollow reputation. I copied all the data into 3 separate backups. I sent one to a secure email, one to my private lawyer, and kept the original safe in my purse. Sitting dazed in front of the now dark computer screen, I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered to my baby, "My sweet child, Mommy is so sorry for choosing the wrong father for you. But don't worry, Mommy won't let anyone hurt you ever again. By tomorrow, Mommy will make the monster pay for every single tear we've shed." The agony inside me gradually transformed into a cold, rock-hard block of resentment. I knew I had no way out, and I didn't want to back down anymore. At the company, a thick tension hung over every square foot of the tiled floor. Employees walked on eggshells, whispering about the unprecedented scandal. I sat in my office, my eyes glued to the computer screen, showing a live feed from a hidden surveillance camera Lauren had planted in the accounting department. Hunter was in there. He was pacing back and forth like a headless chicken, his dress shirt drenched in sweat. He sneakily booted up a computer, his trembling fingers flying across the keyboard, desperately trying to access the internal accounting system to delete the shady wire transfers. He knew the FBI or CPD Financial Crimes Unit could raid the place at any moment, and the wire transfers from the company account to Olivia and his shell company, Apex Holdings, would be irrefutable evidence. However, Hunter didn't know that Lauren and my trusted IT team had quietly seized control of the system last night. Every attempt he made to delete data was blocked by an invisible firewall, while the system automatically backed up the data and sent an alert to my server. I watched Hunter's face contort in absolute despair as a giant red access denied error flashed on his screen. He slammed his fist on the keyboard, pulled at his hair, and frantically pulled out his phone to call someone. I put on my headphones and activated the listening bug I had planted under David's desk a month ago, back when I first started suspecting his infidelity. Hunter's voice echoed through the earpiece, trembling and terrified. "David, I'm dead. The computer won't let me delete the data. It looks like someone locked my admin privileges. What do I do now? If the cops look at the ledgers, I'm dead meat." On the other end, David roared like a wounded animal. "You useless idiot! I told you to be careful. Now listen to me. Find any way you can to pin it on Chloe. Forge evidence. Print out some fake emails saying Chloe was severely depressed and wanted to kill herself, which is why she bought the pills. You have to make people believe she's crazy, understand? But David, she just lost her baby. Doing that is too evil." Hunter weakly protested, his last shred of conscience wrestling with his fear. David scoffed, the cold laugh echoing through the earpiece, making me shudder. "Evil or prison, you choose. If you don't get this done, I'll make sure you rot in prison right alongside Olivia. Move your ass." The call ended, leaving a terrifying silence. Hunter slumped into his chair, buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking violently. I took off my headphones, an immense wave of disgust washing over me. Even at the bitter end, David had absolutely no remorse. He was still trying to trample on the pain of others, to carve a path to survival for himself. He wanted to turn Chloe a victim of his own betrayal and cruelty into a suicidal lunatic. The rumor that David and Hunter were deliberately spreading that Chloe was depressed and suicidal spread rapidly through the company's internal networks. And, of course, it eventually reached Mary's ears. The gentle country mother, who had spent her entire life with her face to the dirt and her back to the sky, suddenly transformed into a fiercely protective mother hen guarding her chick against a hawk. Mary stormed into the corporate lobby right in the middle of the lunch hour. While dozens of employees were passing through, She stood there in her faded brown clothes and cheap sandals. Yet her demeanor radiated an unstoppable fury. Crying and screaming, her voice raw with agony, she shouted, "Where is that bastard CEO? Come out here. You conned my daughter, you ruined her life, and now you want to frame her for suicide. Heaven has eyes. You will get your karma." The building's security rushed over to intervene, but no one dared to put their hands on a deeply grieving elderly woman. A crowd of employees gathered, whispering, pointing, and recording with their phones. The commotion filled the lobby. David was forced to appear. He stepped out of his private elevator, scowling, trying to maintain a facade of calm authority in front of the crowd. He approached Mary, his voice soft but laced with intimidation. "Ma'am, please calm down. Everything can be sorted out. Making a scene here isn't good for anyone. Please step into my office. We can talk, and I'll explain everything clearly." Mary glared at David, her bloodshot eyes blazing. She ignored his invitation and pointed a finger straight at his face. "I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you have to say it right here for everyone to hear. You say my daughter committed suicide? She loved her life. She was sending money home to build a house for me. Why would she die? You and your hypocritical kind pushed her to the brink." David turned pale. He signaled for Hunter to bring out a thick manila envelope. He shoved the envelope into Mary's hands, dropping his voice to a whisper meant only for her. "There's $50,000 in here. Take it, pay for her medical bills, and take her back to Ohio immediately. Stop making things difficult for me. I'm a victim here, too." Standing on the mezzanine looking down, witnessing that cheap bribery scene made my heart bleed. $50,000. Was that the price tag for a young woman's dignity, health, and future as a mother? Mary held the envelope, her trembling hands pulling it open. When she saw the stacks of crisp $100 bills, she suddenly burst out laughing a twisted, bitter laugh. Then, suddenly, she hurled the stacks of cash straight at David's face. The bills fluttered in the air like dead, soulless leaves, scattering across the polished tile floor. "I may be poor, but I do not sell my daughter's blood," Mary screamed. The heart-wrenching wail silenced the entire lobby. "Your money is filthy. I will sue you. I will sue you to the bitter end. Even if I have to sell my house and my land, I will get justice for my daughter." David stood paralyzed in the rain of money, his face burning bright red with humiliation and rage. The crowd began pointing fingers, hurling looks of pure contempt at the supposedly dignified CEO. In that moment, I knew David had lost. He could use money to buy many things, but he couldn't buy the self-respect of a mother who loved her child. The image of those bills fluttering to the floor would be a stain on his life that could never be washed away. After the chaos at the office, I returned home long after dark. The massive mansion was submerged in darkness. Not a single light was on. It was as cold as an abandoned tomb. I walked into the living room and saw David sitting on the sofa, holding a glass of hard liquor, his eyes staring blankly into the void. Seeing me enter, he didn't look up. He just spoke in a raspy voice. "You're home? Did you have a lot of fun at the office today? I bet you were thrilled seeing me humiliated by a country bumpkin in front of all my employees." I flipped the light switch. The yellow light illuminated my husband's haggard, exhausted face. I placed my purse on the table, my voice calm. I didn't find it fun. I only felt sad. Sad that my husband let things go this far. "Why did you give her money? Doing that is no different than admitting your guilt." David scoffed, throwing his head back to down the rest of his drink. "What do you know? In this world, anything that can't be solved with money can be solved with lot times of money. That old woman was just stupid." He stood up and walked into the kitchen. A moment later, he returned holding a glass of warm milk. He placed the milk in front of me, his voice suddenly becoming suspiciously gentle. "Let's leave work at work. Drink this milk to warm your stomach. I've noticed you've lost weight recently, and it breaks my heart. This is imported milk a friend brought back for me. It's really good for pregnant women. It's really good for women." The slip of the tongue pregnant women made my heart seize. Was he testing me? Or did he genuinely want to poison me a second time? I looked at the opaque white milk emitting steam. It felt like I was staring at a bowl of lethal poison. I picked up the glass, feeling the warmth spread through my palm, and looked straight into David's eyes. David, do you remember that crab bisque from the other morning? You also said it was to nourish me. As a result, Chloe almost died. Now, this glass of milk. Are you absolutely sure it's just milk? David's face changed colors. The smile vanished from his lips. He took a step back, his eyes wavering. What? What are you talking about? Are you doubting me? I'm your husband. I smiled bitterly, stood up, and carried the glass of milk over to a large potted plant in the corner of the room. I slowly tilted the glass, pouring the entire stream of white milk into the soil at the base of the plant, right in front of David's stunned gaze. I'm not doubting you, I said, my voice like ice. I'm just afraid I'll end up with a stomach ache like Chloe. This plant needs nutrients too. Let's see if it's still alive tomorrow. I slammed the glass onto the table with a sharp crack. David stared at me in terror. The hypocrisy in his eyes was gone, replaced by naked fear. He knew, I knew everything. The facade of our happy family had officially shattered. Tonight would be the longest night of both our lives, because tomorrow, when the sun rose, the real storm would hit, washing away everything left of this rotting marriage. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, standing in front of the mirror, getting dressed with meticulous care. Today wasn't just a board of directors meeting. It was a funeral, the funeral of my 3-year marriage, and a farewell ceremony to kick the traitors out of my life. Walking into the office, the atmosphere was eerily quiet. It seemed everyone could feel the brewing storm about to explode. I walked straight into the main boardroom, where the shareholders and executive board were fully assembled. David sat at the head of the table. His charcoal gray suit looked baggy on his noticeably thinner frame. Beneath his dark eye bags was an unconcealable anxiety, though he still tried to project authority by tapping his pen rhythmically against the polished mahogany table. Seeing me walk in, David's eyes flashed with vigilance, but he quickly looked away. He cleared his throat, signaling Hunter to begin the meeting. The main agenda today was to approve a massive eco-resort development project in the suburbs. A project David had painted beautifully with promises of astronomical profits. But I knew perfectly well it was just a flashy front for him to hollow out the company, funneling capital into his shell companies to hide assets before our divorce. Hunter stuttered through the presentation, sweating bullets. Even though the AC in the room was blasting, he constantly threw terrified glances in my direction. The shareholders began to whisper, flipping through the files. Some frowned, questioning the feasibility of the magical numbers presented. When it came time for a vote, David hastily stood up, his voice trying to sound commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We need to lock this in today to stay on schedule for the disbursements. I propose the shareholders trust the vision of the executive board and pass this resolution. Just as he finished speaking and was about to raise his hand to vote, I slowly stood up. The screech of my chair against the floor grabbed everyone's attention. I looked straight at David, my voice echoing calmly but coldly. Hold on. David and esteemed shareholders, before we discuss spending the company's money, I believe we need to discuss the moral character and legal standing of the person holding the purse strings. David slammed his hand on the table, shouting, Natalie, this is a strategic board meeting. It's not a fish market for you to air our dirty laundry. If we have issues, we handle them at home behind closed doors. Don't waste everyone's time. I didn't flinch. I gave a slight smile. David, your affair and illegitimate child are indeed family matters, but using company funds to house your mistress, creating a shell company to launder money, and more seriously, purchasing illegal drugs to harm another person, that is a matter for the law. It is a matter of life and death for this company. The shareholders here have the right to know if their money is in the hands of a CEO or a soon-to-be convicted felon. The entire boardroom erupted in shock. Excited whispers buzzed like a disturbed beehive. David's face was drained of all color. He pointed a trembling finger at me, speechless. Before David could regain his composure or call security to drag me out, I signaled Lauren to connect my laptop to the central projector. The massive screen behind David lit up, displaying incredibly sharp images. First were the bank statements, highlighting the wire transfers from the corporate account to Chloe's personal account and Apex Holdings, LLC. The figures hundreds of thousands of dollars were highlighted in red, standing out like bloodstains, exposing his insatiable greed. Next were screenshots of text messages between David and Hunter discussing the forgery of credentials for the shell company. The shareholders, even those who were once close to David, began shaking their heads in disgust. Their looks went from skeptical to disappointed and furious. "This is preliminary evidence of embezzlement," I said, articulating every word. "But the true horror is yet to come." I clicked on the audio file Olivia had given me. The boardroom fell dead silent, everyone holding their breath. The speakers crackled, and then David's unmistakable voice rang out. Asterisk, "I want her to miscarry naturally and cleanly. That fetus is an obstacle. Find me something strong." Asterisk. Every cruel, vicious word echoed through the luxurious boardroom, sounding as chilling as a voice from hell. I saw a few female shareholders cover their mouths in horror, while the men frowned, their eyes hardening with outrage. David looked like a madman. He lunged to rip the HDMI cable from the projector, screaming, "Turn it off! Turn it off right now! It's fake! It's all fabricated! This bitch used AI voice cloning to frame me. Don't believe her." But Lauren, along with 2 security guards I had prearranged, quickly blocked him. David struggled desperately. His face was beet red, the veins in his neck bulging. He looked absolutely pathetic. He turned to look for Hunter to help, but Hunter had already ducked under the table, trembling like a sewer rat in the light. I stepped closer to David, looking directly into his bloodshot eyes. My voice was cold, filled with contempt. "You say it's fake? What about the toxicology report from the crab bisque you personally cooked? What about the confession from Olivia, your ex-girlfriend whom you used to buy the poison? Do you think the whole world conspired to frame you, David? No one framed you. Your own greed and cruelty dug your grave." I turned to the shareholders and declared loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, I possess full legal evidence and live witnesses. I have forwarded copies of these documents to the Chicago Police Department. I move to immediately terminate Mr. Harper from his position as CEO to facilitate the criminal investigation and protect the reputation of this company." Sparse applause began, quickly swelling into a unanimous, thunderous ovation of agreement. David stood there, isolated and stripped bare amidst the scrutinizing stares. He backed up against the wall, slowly sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. His vacant eyes stared into the void. The career he used every dirty trick to build, the reputation he tried so hard to paint, all of it collapsed in a single morning, turning to ash under the crushing weight of the truth. As the applause died down, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom suddenly burst open. The boiling atmosphere in the room instantly froze. 2 CPD detectives in uniform walked in, followed by Olivia wearing dark sunglasses, covering most of her face, and my personal lawyer. Olivia kept her head down, not daring to look at anyone. Her hands were clasped tightly together to hide her trembling. Her appearance was the fatal blow, crushing the last sliver of hope David had left. He looked at Olivia, his eyes wide with disbelief, stammering, "Olivia, why? Why are you here?" The lead detective stepped in front of David, his voice ringing out like steel. "David Harper, we have a warrant for your immediate arrest on charges of attempted murder, aggravated battery, and the illegal purchase and possession of restricted pharmaceutical substances. Please comply and come with us to the precinct." At the same time, the other detective walked toward Hunter, who was cowering in the corner. The moment he saw the badge, Hunter burst into tears, terrified to the point of wetting his pants. "Officers! I don't know anything. It was David. David forced me to do it all. He made me forge the documents. He made me throw away the trash. I'm just an employee. I couldn't disobey the boss. I'll confess to everything. Please let me go." Hunter's swift and cowardly betrayal left David stunned. He turned to look at the trusted cousin he had mentored, his eyes filled with ultimate despair and bitterness. You bite the hand that feeds you," David hissed. But before he could finish his sentence, the cold click of handcuffs echoed sharply. Asterisk, click, asterisk. The hands that once signed million-dollar contracts, that once stroked my hair with vows of eternal love, were now locked tightly in cold metal. The image of the distinguished CEO being escorted out between two police officers left the entire room in a chilling silence. As he walked past me, David suddenly stopped. He looked up at me, his eyes red, his voice hoarse and trembling. "Natalie, how long have you been planning this? Why are you being so cruel to me? We were husband and wife for 3 years." I looked at him. My heart held not a single ripple of sympathy, only an expansive emptiness. I leaned close to his ear and whispered the answer I had kept inside for days. "From the moment you brought me that crab bisque, from the moment you intended to murder our child, you call me cruel. Compared to you trying to poison your wife and baby, sending you to prison is an act of mercy. Goodbye, ex-husband." David bowed his head and dragged his heavy feet out of the boardroom. His shadow stretched long down the hallway, lonely and pathetic. The door closed, but the echoes of the arrest still haunted everyone's minds. At the CPD precinct, the interrogation room was cold and suffocating, enclosed by 4 stark white walls and blinding neon lights. David sat across from the detective. His hair was a mess, his suit rumpled. He looked like he had aged 10 years in just a few hours. Faced with irrefutable, ironclad evidence from Olivia and Hunter's confessions to the toxicology report and the audio recordings, David had no way to deny his crimes. He slumped his head on the table, his voice small, admitting to buying the poison to harm me to seize my assets. However, he stubbornly maintained that Chloe eating the bisque and miscarrying was a tragic accident. He claimed he had no idea she was pregnant. I swear I didn't know she was pregnant." David looked up, tears in his eyes, sounding incredibly wronged. "She told me she was on the pill. I was just playing around with her. I'm not stupid enough to leave consequences. If I knew she was pregnant, I would have forced her to get an abortion a long time ago. I wouldn't have needed to use such an extreme method." His testimony was so cold and ruthless that even the seasoned detective frowned in disgust. To David, the life of an unborn child was merely a consequence to be dealt with, a problem to be eliminated. The detective quietly pulled a lab report from the file and slid it across the table toward David. "Mr. Harper, you say you didn't know, but science doesn't lie. This is the DNA analysis from the fetal tissue the hospital retained for the investigation. The results confirm with 99.99% certainty that the fetus was your biological child, and ironically, according to the genetic analysis, it was a baby boy." David picked up the paper, his hands shaking violently like he had a fever. His eyes locked onto the conclusion, stating a biological paternal match. "A boy. It was a boy," David muttered, his voice cracking. Then, suddenly, he clutched his head and let out a howl of agony like a wounded beast, slamming his head hard against the wooden table. He cried, tears and snot smearing his face. But he wasn't crying out of remorse for committing a heinous crime. He wasn't crying out of pity for Chloe or me. He was crying out of regret for losing the male heir he had desperately wanted. His traditional family heavily favored sons. Even though I was pregnant with a girl, which wasn't public knowledge yet, he always assumed it was one of the reasons he grew bored and looked elsewhere. Standing behind the two-way mirror observing everything, a chill ran down my spine. Even up to this very second, when he had lost absolutely everything, his mind was still filled with nothing but selfishness and sick, outdated patriarchal ideologies. He placed zero value on human life, even if it was his own flesh and blood. That poor baby boy was incredibly lucky not to be born to call a monster like that father. I turned and walked out of the observation room, silently thanking God for protecting my daughter. Even if my child didn't have a father, I would love her 100,000 times more to compensate for the absence of a man unfit to be called human. Chloe was discharged from the hospital after a week of treatment. The doctor said she had kept her life, but her ability to be a mother was permanently gone. The luxury apartment at the Aqua Tower was seized as part of the criminal investigation, so Mary had to take her daughter to a cheap, damp, cramped motel room tucked deep in the suburbs. I didn't want to back anyone into a corner, especially since the mastermind was already behind bars. So, the day before the two of them returned to Ohio, I tracked down their motel room. As soon as I stepped through the door, the smell of mildew hit my nose, making me frown. In the cramped room that barely fit a twin bed and a hot plate, Chloe was huddled in the corner. Her hair was a tangled mess, her dark, lifeless eyes staring blankly at the wall. The glamorous, chic secretary was nowhere to be seen. Chloe was now just a withered, empty shell. Mary was hunched over, packing a few old clothes into a canvas bag. Seeing me, she hurriedly dropped the clothes and wiped the tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. Her voice choked. "Miss Natalie, you came. We're heading back soon. We don't want to bother you anymore. My Chloe. She knows her sins, ma'am." I looked at Mary, her figure worn out, her back hunched from the burdens of life. An infinite wave of pity rose in my chest. This mother had worked her fingers to the bone her entire life, saving every grain of rice to raise her child, hoping she would change her life in the big city. Yet ultimately, all she got back was a daughter ruined in both body and soul, carrying a massive, humiliating shame back to their rural hometown. I stepped closer and placed a thick envelope on the wobbly plastic table. Mary vehemently waved her hands, refusing it aggressively. "No, no, please. You sparing her from a lawsuit is already a blessing for 3 generations of my family. I wouldn't dare take your money. This money is too heavy, ma'am." I took her calloused hands and pressed the envelope into her rough palms, my voice dropping sincerely. "Please take it. This isn't compensation or charity. This is Chloe's final paycheck, plus a little extra to help you with the bus tickets and her medical bills. When you get back home, please try to take care of her. Encourage her to rebuild her life. She's still young. She made a mistake and paid a horrific price. The important thing is, she learns to stand back up and keep living." Hearing this, Mary burst into loud sobs. The elderly mother's cries tore at my heart. My life is so bitter. Why is my child's fate so tragic? She foolishly believed the sweet lies of a married man, and now her body and soul are destroyed. How am I supposed to face the neighbors back home? Chloe, sitting in the corner, also began to sob, her frail shoulders shaking violently. She didn't dare look up at me. The regret and humiliation were probably gnawing at her soul every hour, every minute. I looked at Chloe and spoke to her, my voice calm but stern. "Chloe, you lost your child, and you lost your ability to be a mother. That is the greatest pain a woman can endure. But remember this brutal lesson well. Never build your happiness on the pain of others, and never believe that beauty can be traded for lasting luxury. Live a decent life to repay your mother. Don't ever make her cry for you again." An Uber was waiting outside. Mary helped Chloe out, her steps unsteady and stumbling in the afternoon sun. Chloe looked back at the city, one last time through tear-filled eyes. This place used to be the promised land, full of dreams of changing her life, lavish parties, and expensive designer goods. But now, it was just a terrifying nightmare, the graveyard of her youth and her chance at motherhood. The car disappeared into the busy traffic, leaving the noisy city behind. I stood silently watching it go, secretly hoping that time and the peace of the countryside would heal their emotional wounds, though I knew the scars would always remain, aching every time the weather changed. After David was arrested, the company descended into chaos, like a snake without a head. Employees were panicked, partners were wary, and the stock price was in a freefall. As a major shareholder and the person holding crucial evidence, the board of directors unanimously elected me as the interim CEO to steer the sinking ship. The very first thing I did when I sat in the hot seat David left behind was sign the termination papers for his entire inner circle and Hunter. Anyone who had helped David cook the books or cover up his crimes was packed up and kicked out that very day. I wanted to clean house. I wanted this company to run on transparency and integrity, not on deceit and manipulation. I held a brief press conference, publicly apologizing to the shareholders and clients for the personal scandals of the former CEO. I didn't hide. I didn't shift blame. I bluntly accepted responsibility and committed to getting the company back on track. My sincerity and decisiveness somewhat restored the market's confidence. Watching the financial charts begin to show signs of green again, I breathed a sigh of relief. I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered to my baby, "Mommy did it, sweetheart." Mommy saved your grandfather's legacy. However, the storm wasn't quite over yet. That afternoon, while I was buried in a mountain of backlogged files, a loud commotion erupted in the lobby. The door to my office was violently shoved open. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, stormed in, her face radiating murderous intent. She was wearing a shiny silk outfit, her wrists stacked with gold bracelets, but her face was beet red with fury. As soon as she saw me, she charged forward, pointing her finger right in my face and screaming, "You evil bitch. You bite the hand that feeds you. You're a venomous snake. You threw your husband in jail to steal his assets, didn't you? My son is gentle and kind. How could he ever murder anyone? You must have set him up." I stood up calmly, signaling for my secretary to step out and close the door. I looked at the woman I once called Mom, whom I had devotedly cared for over the past 3 years. Now, she had revealed her true form, a bitter mother-in-law, blindly defending her son. I poured a glass of water, placed it on the desk, and said coldly, "Drink some water to cool down, Eleanor. You say your son is gentle? Gentle enough to buy poison to kill your unborn grandchild?" Eleanor froze, but she stubbornly craned her neck to argue. "Stop slandering him. He said he didn't know that girl was pregnant. He just made a mistake. What man doesn't stray sometimes? As a wife, you're supposed to be forgiving. Instead, you throw him in jail. Do you have any humanity left?" Her shamelessness pushed me past the point of tolerance. I picked up my tablet and opened the video of David confessing in the interrogation room, along with the audio of his conversation with Olivia. I shoved it in front of Eleanor's face and hit play. Her son's voice rang out loud and clear. Asterisk, I want her to miscarry naturally. That fetus is an obstacle. Asterisk. As Eleanor listened, the color drained from her face. Her eyes widened in sheer horror, her lips trembling, unable to form a word. She stared at the screen, where her obedient, perfect son was depicted as a cold-blooded demon, ready to kill his own flesh and blood just for money. When the video ended, Eleanor's arms dropped to her sides. The tablet nearly fell to the floor. She stumbled back a few steps, collapsing onto the sofa, her whole body shaking violently. She couldn't believe that the son she was always so proud of, the one she bragged about to the neighbors, was capable of something so utterly heinous. I looked at her, my voice lowering, but still filled with absolute resolve. "Do you see clearly now? That bisque was originally meant for me. If I had eaten it, your grandchild in my womb would be dead right now. He didn't just want to kill the secretary's baby. He wanted to kill my baby. Your legitimate grandchild. Do you still want to defend him?" Eleanor's jaw dropped. She looked down at my stomach, then back up at my face. The truth was too brutal for her to comprehend. She covered her mouth and burst into loud sobs. But her cries were no longer aggressive. They were the cries of utter shame and regret. She stood up and stumbled out the door. She didn't dare look me in the eye, nor could she utter another word. Her back was hunched over, old and incredibly lonely. I watched her go, harboring no hatred, only pity. She was just a mother, but her blind love and twisted parenting had contributed to the tragedy of today. A week later, I received a notice from my lawyer that I could visit the Cook County Jail to see David and finalize the divorce paperwork. Holding the drafted documents in my hand, I took a deep breath and stepped through the cold iron gates of the jail. The air here was suffocating and grim. The smell of cheap cigarettes, mixed with damp mildew, created the distinct odor of confinement. I was led into a visitation room, sitting down on a chair opposite a thick glass partition. A moment later, a guard escorted David in. I almost didn't recognize the man sitting across from me. It had only been a few weeks, but David had changed beyond belief. His jet black, meticulously styled hair had been shaved off, revealing a pale scalp. His face was gaunt, his cheeks hollow, and rough stubble covered his jaw. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, were now dull, exhausted, and filled with fear. He wore a baggy orange jumpsuit, his handcuffed hands resting on the freezing metal table. Looking at this pathetic state, I wondered where the handsome, charismatic man who had charmed so many women had gone. It was all just a flashy exterior, covering a rotting soul inside. Seeing me, a fragile spark of hope flashed in David's eyes. He leaned forward, his voice coming through the intercom receiver sounding static and trembling. "Natalie, you came to see me? I know you still love me. Can you drop the charges? I was wrong. I swear I'll change. Please think of our 3 years of marriage. Think of the baby in your womb. The baby needs a father, Natalie." I looked at him, my heart as still as a calm lake in autumn. If it were the past, those pleading words might have softened my heart. But now, they only made me feel ridiculous. He was using our child as a shield to beg for a scrap of freedom, when he was the very person who tried to kill her. I coldly slid the divorce papers through the slot under the glass, along with a pen. "Sign it. Our marriage? It died along with the hamster I tested your poison on, and the child in my womb. She doesn't need a father who cooked poisoned bisque for her mother to eat. You don't deserve to be a father." David picked up the papers, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He stared at the words Times. Petition for dissolution of marriage asterisk, and tears began to fall heavily onto the page. "Natalie, I'm begging you. I don't want to lose everything like this. I'll start over. I'll make it up to you and the baby. Don't be so cruel," he cried hysterically, desperately trying to play the remorseful husband. I cut him off, my voice like iron, absolute and definitive. "David, stop acting. You're not crying because you're sorry. You're crying because you regret losing your luxurious life and your CEO chair. Sign it quickly. Don't make me bring out the other evidence regarding the slush funds you embezzled. If I do, you're not looking at 12 years. You're looking at 20. Hearing the word slush funds, David choked. The crying stopped instantly. He knew I wasn't making an empty threat. Trembling, he gripped the pen and messily signed his name on the respondent line. The signature was shaky and distorted, exactly like his life right now. I pulled the papers back, taking one last look at the signature. It was done. A 3-year marriage ended with a single signature in a freezing visitation room, surrounded by 4 prison walls. I stood up and looked straight into David's eyes. "Serve your time well. I hope when you get out, you'll have learned how to be a decent human being. Goodbye." I turned and walked away, leaving behind the weak, desperate calls of my ex-husband. The iron door slammed shut with a heavy thud, separating 2 worlds, 2 destinies. I stepped outside. The blinding sunlight hit the courtyard, making me squint. Freedom. I was truly free. David's trial was swift, thanks to the undeniable evidence I provided. Olivia, acting as a cooperating witness and whistleblower, received leniency from the court. She was given a 2-year suspended sentence. But the price she paid for her complicity was far greater. The State Pharmacy Board permanently revoked Olivia's license. The pharmaceutical company she worked for fired her immediately for severe ethical violations. From a pharmacist with a bright future, high income, and a glamorous life, Olivia became unemployed, carrying the permanent stain of a felony record. I heard from Lauren that Olivia had to sell her condo and her car to pay fines and civil damages. She moved back in with her parents, living as a recluse and avoiding everyone. The flashy, arrogant aura was gone like a popped soap bubble, leaving only humiliation and belated regret. Olivia traded her conscience and her career for the hollow promises of a terrible man and ultimately lost absolutely everything. One evening, while I was reading a prenatal book aloud to my baby, my phone buzzed with a new text. It was an unknown number, but looking at the content, I knew instantly it was Olivia. The message was a massive wall of text, filled with apologies and whining. Asterisk Natalie, I am 1,000 times sorry. I know I was wrong. I was manipulated by David. I'm suffering so much right now. I've lost everything, and my parents have disowned me. I regret it so much, Natalie. I skimmed through the words, feeling absolutely zero emotion. What was the point of an apology now? When she took David's money and sneaked that package of poison to Hunter, did she think about the consequences today? Or was she busy fantasizing about becoming the CEO's wife, laughing at my pain? I didn't reply. My finger swiped lightly across the screen, and I hit delete. The message vanished as if it never existed. I didn't need her apology to feel better. Forgiveness isn't always necessary, especially for those who knew they were doing wrong but did it anyway. Those who conspired to kill me and my baby. I chose to forget them, treating them like a speck of dust that accidentally flew into my eye. It stung for a moment, and then it was gone. I set my phone down and gently rubbed my growing baby bump. My baby was kicking lightly. The strong, energetic kicks seemed to remind me that life still held so many beautiful things ahead. Karma is very fair. You reap what you sow. David, Hunter, Chloe, and Olivia, they were all paying the price for their horrific choices. As for me, I chose strength. I chose to protect my child and myself. And so, I deserved peace. I turned off the lamp and fell into a deep, wonderful sleep I hadn't experienced in a very long time. No more nightmares, no more anxiety, only the belief in a brighter tomorrow. However, it seemed life wanted to test my patience one last time. Eleanor, my ex-mother-in-law, still hadn't given up after her shocking meltdown in my office. Perhaps her greed and pride were so deeply ingrained in her bones that she couldn't accept her son losing everything. She started going around everywhere from her neighbors in the suburbs to relatives back home, spreading rumors that I was a wicked, gold-digging daughter-in-law who stole her husband's family assets and threw him in jail. Those malicious lies reached my ears through the maids. I just scoffed. Heaven and earth know how people live. I can't control the gossip of the world. The climax came one Sunday morning. I was sitting in the garden, soaking up the sun, when Eleanor's lawyer showed up. He was a middle-aged man with slicked back hair, carrying a shiny leather briefcase. He presented a document demanding a division of assets, insisting that I return half of my company's shares and this mansion to her son's family, claiming it was marital property. He cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative. Miss Natalie, my client, Eleanor Harper, wishes to resolve this quietly. Considering David is in a difficult situation, and you were his wife, she hopes you'll show some decency and split the assets so she can fund his legal appeals. I picked up the paper, internally disgusted by their absolute shamelessness. I slowly set my teacup down and looked straight at the lawyer. Tell your client that all decency ended the day her son put poison in my crab bisque. As for the assets, you're a lawyer. You should know the law better than I do. This mansion was a pre-wedding gift exclusively given to me by my parents, fully notarized. And as for the company shares, would you like to review the prenuptial agreement David signed? Or perhaps you'd like to review the evidence of him embezzling tens of millions of dollars to fund his mistress. If we take this to civil court for asset division, I'm afraid he'll owe times massive restitution. The lawyer froze. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He didn't expect me to hold the winning hand so flawlessly. I stood up, adjusting my maternity dress. My voice was soft, but made of steel. Tell Eleanor to stop making a fool of herself. If she continues to harass me or defame my character, I will sue her for libel. Then it won't just be the son in prison. The mother will be standing trial, too. Please leave. The lawyer hastily grabbed his files and bolted, not daring to look back. Watching him disappear past the gates, I breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, the greedy had to retreat in the face of justice. Time flew by. My belly grew larger every day, stretch marks appearing like the sacred insignias of motherhood. 6 months after David was arrested, on a night of torrential rain, labor pains hit unexpectedly. The agonizing cramps radiated from my lower back to my abdomen, making me break out in a cold sweat. I called Lauren and my driver and rushed to Northwestern Memorial. Lying on the gurney, being pushed down the stark white hospital corridor, amidst the excruciating, tearing pain, the memories of that day flooded back. It was this very same hospital corridor, but that day represented sheer terror and the death of another life. Today, it was hope and a new life fighting to be born. The delivery room was freezing, but filled with the urgency of the doctors and nurses. I bit my lip hard, sweat soaking my hairline, trying to follow the doctor's every command. You're doing great. I see the head. Deep breath. And push hard. The doctor's voice rang out like a command, urging my maternal instincts to rise stronger than ever. I used every last ounce of my strength, compressing all my love and resilience into that final breath. A rush of warmth left my body, followed instantly by a loud, echoing wail that shattered the tense atmosphere. Congratulations, it's a beautiful baby girl. 7 pounds, absolutely perfect. The nurse cheered, placing the tiny, red, newborn baby on my chest. In that moment of skin-to-skin contact, time seemed to stop. I looked at the tiny life nestled in my arms. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her tiny mouth smacking, searching for warmth. Hot, salty tears streamed down my face. But they were tears of absolute, overwhelming joy. Asterisk, my baby is here. Asterisk, flesh and blood, whole and healthy. I named her Hope, a simple name, but it contained everything I wished for her life: peace, safety, and no more storms. I gently kissed her forehead, whispering, "Welcome to the world, my sweet Hope. Thank you for being so strong and staying with Mommy." Suddenly, a thought flashed through my mind, making me shudder with emotion. If I hadn't pushed away that crab bisque because of my morning sickness that morning, this sacred moment would never, ever exist. Fate was incredibly miraculous, yet so incredibly cruel. That fateful bisque took one life but saved another. I looked at my daughter. In her newly opened, dark eyes, I saw a reflection of myself, a woman who had walked through a hurricane to find the rainbow. I no longer resented the past, because if it weren't for those agonizing tragedies, I would never have known how truly strong I was. I hugged my baby tightly, making a silent promise to myself that I would be both father and mother. I would shield her from every storm life threw at her. I would let her grow up surrounded by the most complete love, compensating for whatever she might lack by not having a father around. On the day the court sentenced David and Hunter, a torrential downpour flooded the city. The sky was a bleak, gloomy gray. I didn't attend the sentencing. I only authorized my lawyer to go on my behalf. I didn't want to see that man's face ever again, nor did I want to reopen wounds that were finally healing. I chose to stay home, holding baby Hope in my arms, sitting in front of the TV watching the noon news. The anchor's steady voice rang out, asterisk, reporting on the high-profile case that shocked the city recently. This morning, the Cook County Circuit Court sentenced the defendant, David Harper, to 12 years in federal prison for aggravated battery, attempted murder, and the illegal purchase and distribution of restricted pharmaceutical substances. His accomplice, Hunter Evans, was sentenced to 7 years in prison, asterisk. The TV screen showed an image of David standing before the judge. He was skeleton thin, his eyes sunken and dark. The baggy prison jumpsuit only exaggerated his pathetic, gaunt appearance. Hearing the sentence, David bowed his head, his shoulders shaking violently. I wondered what was going through his mind right then. Was he remorseful for the heinous crimes he committed? Or was he still cursing fate and blaming everyone else? I looked at that face, trying to find some emotion in my heart. Vindication, anger, pity. But strangely, I felt absolutely nothing. Only a light, airy emptiness, as if a 1,000-pound weight that had been clinging to me for so long had just been lifted. Hope squirmed in my arms, letting out adorable little coos, demanding to be fed. I turned off the TV. The screen went black, and the image of my ex-husband vanished into the darkness. I looked down at my baby and smiled gently. David's world was now confined to 4 cold prison walls, where regret and torment would gnaw at him every single day. My world was right here, entirely encapsulated in my arms, warm and full of hope. The past was truly closed after the bang of the judge's gavel. 12 years in prison was the price he had to pay the law. But the life sentence from his own conscience was what would follow him until his dying day. I stood up, carrying my baby out to the balcony. The rain had stopped. Faint rays of sunlight began to pierce through the leaves, shining down on the wet pavement. The air after the rain was incredibly fresh and cool. I took a deep breath, feeling freedom spread through every cell in my body. No more calculations, no more lies, no more living in constant fear and anxiety. There was only me, my daughter, and a wide-open future ahead. I knew the road to being a single mother would have its hardships, but I wasn't afraid, because I knew I had won the most important battle of my life, the battle for survival. 2 years later. Early morning, brilliant golden sunlight filtered through the skyscrapers, illuminating my executive office on the 20th floor in downtown Chicago. The Food and Beverage Corporation, under my leadership, had completely overcome the crisis and was thriving more than ever. New products were constantly selling out, and our brand reputation grew stronger by the day. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the bustling traffic below, feeling like I was standing on the peak of a mountain I had to bleed and scrape my knees to climb. The office door burst open. Little Hope toddled in on her chubby legs, babbling, "Mommy, Mommy!" She was wearing a cute pink dress today, her 2 pigtails bouncing with every step, looking exactly like a little angel. Lauren followed right behind her, laughing and panting. "Natalie, this little CEO runs way too fast." I couldn't catch her. First thing in the morning, and she's already demanding to come up and see her mom. I bent down and scooped my daughter up, inhaling the sweet, milky scent of her hair. All the exhaustion of work seemed to instantly vanish. Hope hugged my neck, nuzzling her face into my shoulder affectionately. For the past 2 years, she had been my greatest motivation to strive, the medicine that healed every wound in my heart. I set her down on the sofa, handed her a favorite toy, and went back to my desk. My phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a new text message. It was an unknown number, but the content made me pause for a few seconds. Asterisk, "Hi Natalie, it's Michael, your partner on the Green Farm Initiative. Are you and Hope free this weekend? I know a beautiful nature reserve out in the suburbs with amazing fresh air. I'm sure Hope would love it. If it's all right with you, please allow me to take you two out for a weekend trip." Asterisk. I read the message, the corner of my lips unconsciously curving into a soft smile. Michael was a calm, decent man I had recently met at a business seminar. He knew my background. He knew I was a single mother. But he never showed pity. Instead, he always treated me with profound respect and appropriate care. I looked out the window. The Chicago sky today was a piercing, flawless blue, not a single cloud in sight. The dark clouds of the past had truly dissipated, making way for the warm sunshine of the present. I didn't reply immediately. I turned to look at Hope, who was happily playing. I understood now that happiness isn't a final destination. It's the journey we're on. I had stumbled. I had suffered ultimate agony because I placed my trust in the wrong person. But I didn't let that close my heart. I still believed in love. I still believed in good things. It was just that now. I knew how to love myself first. I picked up the phone, my fingers gliding lightly across the keyboard, typing a short reply. Asterisk. "Thank you, Michael. We would love to." Asterisk. I hit send. I picked Hope up in my arms. Mother and daughter looked out at the vast sky together. A yellow leaf fell onto the windowsill, but right next to it, a vibrant green sprout was stretching strongly to catch the morning sun. Life is exactly like that. There is birth, and there is death. There is pain, and then there is growth. And after the rain, the sky clears more brilliant and pristine than ever before. I kissed my daughter's cheek, silently thanking life for giving me a chance to be reborn, allowing me to fully live and cherish every peaceful moment of today. Thank you all for listening. Goodbye, and see you next time.